It's been a year and a half now since Anthem was officially unveiled all the way back in E3 2017, and my thoughts on the game continues to remain the same. The world looks great and the gameplay mechanics look real solid, but this game is just lacking the soul of Bioware, the deeply interwoven dynamic storytelling and character interactions one might come to expect. I was holding my breath that Bioware would go all out in E3 2018 and show off how Anthem's narrative has been implemented into the game. But what we learned instead was that a dynamic and interactive story has been completely separated from the world and the core gameplay. Bioware calls this format Our World, My Story, and what that entails is that you'll interact with a few key characters and establish friendships inside the game's hub, Fort Tarsis, but when you're out there in the world, outside the safety of home, things like dynamic plot developments, chance encounters with interesting characters, as well as in-the-moment dialogue choices and decision-making, hallmarks of a Bioware game, will be practically non-existent. When you're out there exploring, the game will essentially turn into a more typical shooter-looter that's pushed forward by an overarching linear plot. To many fans of Bioware, learning of this was highly disappointing, especially after Casey Hudson himself promised that Anthem would have all the makings of a traditional Bioware game within a multiplayer-focused, shared-world live service environment. He talked about how players would become the hero of their own story, shape what happens next, so on and so forth, touting how Bioware was working towards a solution for implementing deep storytelling in a multiplayer game, a problem Casey said hasn't been solved before. And yet the only so-called solution I've seen to this problem is to extract the player-driven storytelling from the core game and segregate it into its own little bubble, which isn't what many were hoping for. Not to mention that Bioware confirmed that dialogue options will be much more limited than past Bioware games, and that romance options have been omitted outright, giving off the impression that interactions with characters during the My Story bits are destined to feel shallow compared to other Bioware efforts. But on top of all that, the emphasis on gameplay over story is now something that Bioware is doubling down on, despite previous insinuations that there would be a balance between the two elements. The following information comes from issue 205 of Games TM magazine, as transcribed by website WCC Tech. Speaking to Games TM in a recent interview, Anthem director Jonathan Warner discussed how refreshing it's been to be able to create something that puts gameplay first above all else. He said, quote, "Yeah, it is. It's very refreshing. It's invigorating. And usually when you talk about a Mass Effect or a Dragon Age, people invariably end up talking about the plots or the points. And it's very refreshing when people talk about Anthem, they talk about flying or fighting monsters or the gear, the javelins, and it's been a great opportunity for us to put gameplay first." Warner then proceeded to emphasize that this doesn't mean Anthem is devoid of storytelling or interesting characters, stating the following: "It's very important to us that we create immersive worlds, where you can have companionship, and where you get to be the hero of your own story. I think those elements are very much intact with Anthem. But those moments, the companionship and strong characters, those are very much there." He then concluded by emphasizing how the intent is to make a game for as many kinds of players as possible with the following statement: "We are looking at it as kind of a holistic experience and making sure that we're paying attention to and doing things that will engage players across the board. Everybody's got kind of a different motivation, providing lots of interesting reasons to come back." One major detriment to BioWare's marketing campaign so far has been, I think, how vague they have been about how storytelling works in this game, which is what BioWare fans in particular are most curious about and invested in. All live gameplay demonstrations BioWare has shown thus far have completely emphasized explosive action above all else, with very little in the way of engaging narrative. What little we did see of the story was shown in a short trailer, which only spent about a minute talking about how you'll form relationships with certain key characters, and stating in vague terms how your choices will have consequences and all that. But we have yet to see a single presentation or demonstration of these character moments with consequences. For all their talk about how there will be enough dynamic story to make you feel like the hero of your own story, the lack of a story showcase is a strange omission, and all things considered, BioWare has very little to show for their promises, which is making people think that BioWare doesn't actually have much in the way of dynamic storytelling to show or present. One thing that's abundantly clear, however, is that whatever dynamic storytelling there is in Anthem will strictly occur within Fort Tarsis, so don't expect to be discovering settlements housing NPCs with troubles and woes you can choose to help solve, or with interesting tales to share, or anything like that while exploring the world beyond the walls. And that to me is a damn shame, because from what Bioware said, Anthem was seemingly being built to have the depth of a single-player Bioware game that takes place in a multiplayer environment. But instead it looks to be a fairly traditional MMO-style shared world experience that isn't far removed or all that unique from other games in the genre. Everything I've seen thus far looks surprisingly by the books, given all this talk of solving narrative problems other multiplayer games haven't figured out and whatnot. And with the latest statement from Warren, it's become abundantly clear that for Bioware, a deep dynamic story is secondary compared to the shooting and looting, rather than those two aspects being perfectly balanced. For some people, this will be just fine, and if Anthem can provide a fun gameplay loop with an expansive endgame, I think it does have the potential to keep players hooked for years on end. If you're among that crowd, that is great, and I hope you have a good time with this title when it launches in February of next year. But for others like myself who are hoping Anthem would finally be the game to break the mold of online multiplayer games sacrificing storytelling and bridge the gap between single-player depth and multiplayer systems, this game may not be what we are looking for, and will instead be hoping that Bioware returns to form with the release of the upcoming Dragon Age 4 and a new Mass Effect. I do hope to check out the game's beta and get a better idea for what this game is all about before making a final deliberation though. It could very well turn out that the game will manage to impress me in the way it balances gameplay and storytelling. That's the hope at least. Nothing would actually please me more than to have my skepticism shattered and my pessimism proven wrong. Perhaps there is more to Anthem than currently meets the eye, but if there is, I don't think that EA and Bioware are doing a particularly good job of showcasing that. I won't know anything for sure until I actually get my hands on the game though, so until then, I would love to hear what your take is about Anthem putting gameplay first in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy my content and would like to support this channel directly, consider donating on Patreon. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.